any other measurement. But if you assume space is curved, which we don't actually know, and there's curvature to space-time and gravitational pull and all that, it projects the distances between planets and stars to be much closer than what we think. Using Riemannian geometry, light from the most distant star could have traveled to us in 15 years. So we don't know. It's still a long ways away. 15 years traveling 186,000 miles per second for 15 years, that's a lot of miles. It's still far, and it needs to be noted that scientists truly don't know whether space is flat or curved. They don't know. They don't know if it's plane, if it's a ball. They have no clue. So either method of equating this stuff is based on assumptions. The third possible answer, not my favorite one, but light could have, if we're following science and Einstein here, light could have taken a shortcut to get to us, these light beams through a wormhole, whatever. I do believe that God, like I said, placed the light beams in the sky for us to see at the time he created the stars. But the fourth answer is this, and this one's speed of light may not actually be constant. Now, the first year I did this was a question. Speed of light may not be constant. I was trying to find out. We know today that it is not constant. The speed of light is, in fact, not constant. As you travel back in time, light travels faster. The further back you go, the faster light travels. One of the things we'll talk about what Hawking left us before death, Hawking radiation. Think about a black hole. Black holes are collapsed stars with gravitational force so big nothing can escape them. So they ask, what started this was science asking, what happens to light beams, photons and light beams at the moment of the collapse of this star and the building of this black hole? So with every equation, it appears that for a brief moment, the gravitational force is so large that it would have to slow some of that traveling light. Those light beams would slow down, and for a split second, they would stop before they're sucked backwards into the collapsed star. Therefore, light's not constant. We've seen that it does slow down over time and distance traveled. So the two very best arguments are tentative, doubtful at best, really. So the more we learn about our universe, the more tentative and doubtful these things become. The more planets and solar systems we do find, the more special we realize we are. They were so excited with the Kepler's telescope because they were going to find exoplanets. They were going to find more solar systems like the Earth. We have found hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of exoplanets, planets in other solar systems at this point, 0 which look like ours. None of them look like our solar system. They usually have giant Jupiter-sized gas planets very close to the star, and that's about it. Every once in a while, they'll have a rocky planet that is locked right next to the star, but it's either small or it's being ate up by the gas giant as well. We found nothing like us. With the protections that we have in place, Jupiter is it seems to be in the wrong place, according to every other solar system we find. Almost like this big brother placed there to protect us from other objects in the universe. So the more we see, the more we find, the more special we realize we are. Hawking, I said, he gave us this thing called Hawking radiation before his death, where he tried to figure out what happens to all the light. What's at the end of the universe, when everything in their eyes is over with, the last thing you'll have are black holes. But at some point, since energy decreases over time, becomes less available over time, it's got to transform into something else. And as he started working on it, he equated it that the universe, if it were to actually end, would end up ending in one big, beautiful, basically glow of red light as these black holes finally just explode, and all the mass and everything that's in them just ends up being a ring of lit red radiation for a split second, and it disappears. There's, again, light that was not existent, all of a sudden exists in a form and then disappears. So it was really his work that started pushing the speed of light not being constant. We were seeing more of that. So just say that to question things that you're told. I had to drop that. Okay. Don't let it mess with your faith. They have a philosophy they stand by, so do we. That's about all that I want to get into, but I do want to get into the flood, the deluge, the global flood, the evidence for a global flood. Bible tells us there was a global flood, right, around 42 to 4,600 years ago. This is another question that people ask in these circles that are wanting to, they're searching this out with faith. What about the evidence for a global flood? Genesis 6 and 7 clearly tells us that a flood covered the entire earth as an act of judgment against man's rebellion and man's sin. I can't give you a ton of detail here because of the time we have tonight, but I do want to say a few things about the flood. First thing, the Bible clearly describes a global flood, not a local flood or a regional flood. I sat in here, we had a group that used to rent from us, and they had a special guest come speak one night. And after the leader of this other congregation had me hear some of this guy's stuff that was already set up, he was coming here to speak for their event, not our church event. I listened to some of this guy's teachings. And everything was heretical. It was like heresy, things he was saying. So I wanted to come hear what he was talking about because he was a Messianic Jewish believer that wanted to teach about the science of the flood. So I watched him for 2.5 hours. Oh my God, 2.5 hours. Sit here and try to pull apart the idea of a global flood and turn it into a regional flood because that fit his narrative of science in his brain. And all I saw him do was really murder the Hebrew language and then take all need for faith out of people's belief. That's all he did. And I mean, he literally had to stab the Hebrew language to death to make it work. But there are people who want to compromise Scripture, and they want to describe this as a local flood, something that happened in Mesopotamia only, covered a small region where Noah lived in his world, his area. They call that his world. But it's not what the Bible talks about. It describes a flood that covered, Genesis 7:18, all the high mountains under the heavens. Not all the high mountains under that region, all the high mountains under the heavens. And a flood that killed everything that breathes through its nostrils on earth. Not in the region, not in Mesopotamia, but on earth. The Hebrew word for earth is eretz. Okay? Erez, excuse me. People like this gentleman that came to teach, they like to say that the Bible points out a regional flood. The Hebrew word used for world in the flood story, eretz, is the exact same word used in Genesis 1:1. God created the heavens and the region. God created the heavens and the Mesopotamia. God created the heavens and Angelina. God created the heavens and the earth, the world. So you can't make a local flood scenario fit the biblical text. Second thing, there is very strong historical evidence that supports the flood. And archaeologists have found over 250 different flood legends from over 250 different ancient cultures. Throughout history, we have found information of 33 primary ancient cultures that have been discovered in the world. Primary ancient cultures that everything is descended from. Of the 33 primary ancient cultures around the world, 33 of 33 have a flood tradition, a global flood tradition. 31 of them have a common tradition that the flood was destructive across the globe as well. 32 of them say that man was divinely saved somehow by the flood. 30 of the 33 say that there was a provision made for animals. 25 of the 33 describe some kind of ark or boat that landed on top of a mountain. 29 of the 33 describe a bird being sent from the boat to find dry land. This all sound familiar? Okay. 29 of the 33 also, or 30 of the 33 describe a colored arch as a symbol of divine favor. The rainbow, God's covenant symbol in the sky. It's interesting, and I've said this for years, and it's interesting to me that the rainbow, not just now, but it's used as a symbol of activism. I'm not going to say rights, I'm going to say activism. Activism, and that's how perverse we've come, that not only moral decay that we've sunken into, but we actually flaunt it in God's face. We take his symbol of his holy covenant and we use it for mankind's sin, a symbol of mankind's sin. 31 of the 33 ancient cultures say they have this flood story, say that the first thing people did when they landed on dry ground is worship God. I would hope so. I would think so. So if you ever study history, there are these laws, there are principles to historical analysis that for some reason they never get looked at when it comes to the flood. But the two laws of historical analysis, number one, it's commonly understood that if isolated people groups, different areas, have the same tradition in their stories, then they reflect some kind of common ancestry. They all came from something common. And then the second historical analysis law is that when widely separated people groups have the same tradition, it must reflect some kind of historical event, some kind of historical occurrence. We have 250 different flood legends. We have 33 of the primary ancient cultures have a story about this flood. And we want to say that it's mythological. It's just myth. There's evidence all over the globe that points to a global flood. So it's one of the many reasons I say there's strong evidence supporting a global flood is, well, just historical analysis alone shows us that there was something that happened. There's also strong geological evidence that supports a global flood. Again, if you ever have a chance to see the documentary, Dragons or Dinosaurs, they will talk about this as well. Paleontologists, geologists will talk about the global evidence. Years ago, I took youth and adults to a movie called Is Genesis History. It's available on just about every streaming platform right now. It's a phenomenal movie about just some of this evidence that we see of a global flood. But geological evidence, like the Grand Canyon, is one. Scientists say it took billions and billions of years for the Colorado River to erode the Grand Canyon. Did you know that the top of the Grand Canyon, okay, the top of the Grand Canyon, where this starts, is higher in elevation than where the Colorado River begins? So that means it would have had the Colorado River had to flow uphill for several millions of years before it could erode away going downhill. Yes. Before it could dig a ditch deep enough to start flowing down to create the rest of it. Anyway, Grand Canyon, actually, there's models that have been made now. There's computer programs that it could have been created in a matter of days under the hydraulic pressure that comes off the runoff of a global flood. Mount Ararat is 17,000 feet in the air, has marine fossils at the top of it. Himalayas, 20,000 feet in the air, have marine fossils that are discovered at the top. So there's tons of fossil evidence supporting this. I understand they say they were all those at one time. Those were on the sea floor. Actually, they were covered by the sea at one time, and I believe it was the flood. But if a global flood occurred that literally drowned every breathing creature on the planet, then you would expect to be able to find millions and millions and millions of bodies of dead animals that were swept into various places under this torrential runoff, right? You would expect there to be this runoff to deposit tons and tons of dead bodies into a large area of graves, too. The way you get a fossil, you should find fossil beds or graveyards. If there was a global flood, there should be fossil beds and graveyards of all kinds of dead animals that were rapidly covered with mud. The way you get fossilization of something is rapid encapsulation of tar or mud, typically mud. I have the Karoo Formation. That formation there throughout it, that's just a picture of the area. They say that what formed it was over the millions of years, tectonic plates pushed up those mountains into that form, and that's why you see different fossil layers in different areas. But there's 800,000 million vertebrate skeletons have been found fossilized in that area. The lone Love Bone Bed, in Gainesville, Florida, it's one of many in that area, but it's a fossil bed. Just the Love fossil bed, or bone bed, is 120 feet long, 60 feet wide, 15 feet deep. They have 100 different species buried in that one alone. There's like 7 or 8 different beds in that area. They found mass sweeps of species in there. They found sharks, whales, manatees, freshwater gars, alligators, turtles, snakes, raccoons, wolves, saber-toothed tigers, elephants, rhinos, horses, camels, and so on. Some of these things are not like the others. How did all those animals get to Florida in that one area? It's very possible they were washed away or washed by a global flood into one area. It makes sense, which is how you get snails, okay, and fish fossils on top of some of the world's highest mountains. Some of y'all have heard this, so it won't be as big of a deal. Some of you haven't, so stick with me here. But in Alaska, they've discovered hundreds of frozen mammoths that are still standing. Hundreds of them died of suffocation. There's different things. There's food in their stomach. Some of them still have tropical plants in their mouths that they're chewing, tropical. They've been frozen perfectly. There's Alaskans that claim to have eaten the meat. Next slide, there you go. That's one, what's left of the head, body. You see the fur down below it where they've been chopping into this stuff. Next slide. These are frozen mammoths and rhinoceros finds, the red dots, areas they've been found in. So the Alaskans say they would actually use saws to carve huge chunks of meat off of these frozen mammoths and eat it. So there's evidence of it. You can search for it. There's no way to explain that type of phenomenon, something freezing rapidly standing up, other than a global flood. Coal beds. Global flood could have formed coal beds and oil reserves in a very short period of time. Very short period of time. The runoff would have been unbelievable because the water from the flood didn't evaporate. It had to run off somewhere. And I'll get into this, but huge caverns beneath the Earth's crust had pumped up all this water, causing it to flood. Genesis 7:11 says the fountains of the deep burst forth. It rained. Yeah, it rained eventually, but the fountains of the deep burst forth. My goodness. There's a very old documentary called Amazing Bible Stories. You can find it somewhere. Probably on, I think it's on Prime. They do a great job of talking about some of this stuff, but the earth is not just 70% covered in water. They believe that there's another 10 oceans worth of water entombed inside the earth, okay, in different caverns and places underneath. Give me my slide on the layers. So you have the different, you see the atmosphere, or what would be the ice layer, and then crust, mantle, and you have these oceanic. You have some trenches that go up where this stuff comes out. Next slide. Created with water. So the earth was created with water under the crust, water, ice over the air. We'll get to the water, ice. We talked about the firmament in the sky being a canopy of vapor crystal, basically. Next one. Talk about the canopy overhead crumbled and the water under the crust burst forth and flooded the entire world. The pressure would have been immense. It would have melted the ice canopy and all that. So do I have another one? All right. 600 years of Noah's life, in the second month, 17th day of the month, same day, all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. The rain was upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. It had not really rained up until this point. Everything was watered from this dew that collected on the ground in the morning time. So there are features around the planet that systematically can be explained as a result of a cataclysmic global flood, from waters that erupted from subterranean chambers exceeding 10 billion hydrogen bombs. There are some scientists, some creationists that believe that the near-Earth asteroids we have are actually from Earth exploding. When the crust and the mantle exploded from the pressure of the water, it blew that stuff in outer space. At first, I thought it was impossible. Last year, or year before last, I actually found an underground nuke test that we did where it wasn't 10 billion hydrogen bombs. It was what we could legally do, and it was covered. You know, they had a manhole cover. They went down into the system. The manhole cover is currently in space. We blew it into outer space on accident. So hopefully it stays up there, because I cannot imagine the destruction if it comes down. But I know we did that with a manhole cover at 10 billion. If you think of 10 billion hydrogen bombs, what could we blow into space? So the model of a global flood and the subterranean waters bursting forth, it shows how major mountain forms could form. Major mountains could form rapidly. Coal deposits form quickly. Continental drift could happen quickly. It's called the hydrodrift theory. I've talked about it before. Hydrodrift theory was proven. There was a race to prove why the continents separate. It was proven by a female geologist back before there really could be female geologists. So she had to work under a male to get her stuff approved. She worked on it diligently. She finally has the proof for it, and Time Magazine had just given someone the Nobel Prize for the continental drift theory on the tectonic plates. Okay, there's full proof to her work, though. Hydrodrift theory is something that's actually occurred. You see there where the crust burst, it shows it with a spring, but as it bursts up, mantle, crust, things buckle and then slide down. But next, what do I have? Okay, in the beginning, this is the Walt Brown book. But as this stuff buckled, as the waters busted forth, and the Earth's crust starts eroding away, so that underneath, the pressure that's been holding it down is gone, and it buckles up, creating mountains and ridges. Do I have another one? That's in the wrong place. I put that in the wrong place. Okay, next one. All right. Evidence given to support continental drift. Shapes of the continent seem to fit fossils found on opposite sides of the ocean, magnetic reversals in the mid-Atlantic range. What else do I have? What they don't tell you, Africa, when they fit the systems together, Africa has been shrunk by 35 to 45% to actually make it fit their model of continental drift. Okay, Mexico and Central America are gone from their model. It's not because somebody built a wall and you can't see over it. It's just they're gone. Okay. They're out. They get rid of them altogether to make the whole idea fit. We figure up the landmass of what they figured there. We're missing Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, Nicaragua, El Salvador. It's gone. But that's the model in your textbooks that you read as a kid, that you saw as a kid. And everyone went, wow. What they got against them? Don't nobody answer that right now, okay? A lot of political stuff going on. But do I have anything else? Is that the last one, the truth one? Europe, South America have also been rotated counterclockwise, clockwise. It's just funny anyway. All right, erosion question. Do I have another one there? There we go, okay. Continents erode into the oceans. We know they do that, right? We can measure this, but there's only enough sediment in the ocean for a few thousand years of erosion that we can actually measure for some reason. Next one, magnetic reversal. Textbooks say there are magnetic reversals in the rock. Next one. It's clear the simple model of uniformity and magnetism, crustal blocks of alternating polarity does not represent reality. That's the truth. This whole idea of this alternating stuff is not, it's false. Next one. This is in the beginning. This is a book by Walter Brown, that there are no magnetic reversals on the ocean floor, right? There are weaker magnetic areas and stronger magnetic areas, but they use the whole reversal idea to prove the whole point of the continental drift and why Pangaea moved from what it was to what it is now, slowly over millions and millions of years. Let me explain. The tectonic plates do move. They move at about the same pace that your fingernails grow. So measure that out if you want to. Figure that out. What's my next one? Textbook stuff. Next one. Okay, the plates are moving. But current plate movement doesn't prove that they've always been moving, first of all, or the rate's always been what we see today. It doesn't mean, yes. In half? Did they vote about that? Okay. It's gone. Gone. I keep waiting for that to happen to California. Just go. I told my little sister, I heard it somewhere. I told my little sister a lot of stuff, my little stepsister throughout the years that I didn't know until she was like 20-something that she still believed. Like you can't touch, the AC, the filter you have to put in your return air, that stuff would eat your skin and it would burn off of you. We were probably trying to protect her, okay? But another one I had heard it on some show or something, but she's reading one of her little textbooks for school and it's showing the wind power, the wind power things in California at the time, and I remember what the joke was, so I used it, that they used that to blow California back on to the United States because they manufacture those things in Shreveport, Louisiana, okay, the blades for them. So as one's leaving, she goes, it's one of those things that hey, Jeremy, look, it's one of those things that keeps California hooked to the United States. I'm like, what are you talking about? So she goes into detail telling me, I said, that is the most ignorant thing I've ever heard. But she said, you told me that. Like, bless her heart. It's a good thing she was pretty. All right, do I have another slide or not? All right, if I see someone headed east on I-10 at 70 miles an hour, does that prove that they started in LA 4 days ago? Were they always traveling at that speed? Have they been traveling constantly at that speed? Don't know. Continental drift avoids a couple problems, okay? It avoids two problems. The magnetic field is getting weaker over the entire planet, okay? Making the Earth less than 25,000 years old, and there's very little sediment in the ocean for the erosion of the continents. Only a few thousand years worth. Hydrodrift theory explains why there are huge trenches and huge canyons, and I'm not saying either one is right, I'm just saying there's better explanations. It explains the formations of ocean-layered strata and fossil records. It explains major land canyons like the Grand Canyon. Pre-flood, yes, was probably one very large supercontinent. Hydroplate happened. The pre-flood Earth had a lot of subterranean water. They believe it to be about half a mile thick. Increasing pressure, I don't know if I have a slide here, but increasing pressure caused failure in the crust, a rupture in the crust, and all this water, as I said, start pumping up, allowing this microscopic crack to appear that grew about 3 miles a second. Grew 3 miles a second. It went to the path of least resistance, circling the globe in about 2 hours. As the crack raced around the Earth, the overlying rock and crust would open up like a zipper or a rip-in cloth right across. Subterranean waters are under immense pressure because the weight of the crust on top of it. Water exploded violently, supersonically, 20 miles or so into the atmosphere. That produced torrential rains. The Bible says, like I said, the fountains of the great deep burst open on one day. High pressure fountains, if you can imagine, are eroding the rock on both sides of this crack, producing huge volumes of sediment. As it's eroding and it's shooting it up into the air. Muddy runoff all over the earth. That sediment would have trapped animals and buried plants and formed the fossil record really quickly. Erosion, then it would widen the rupture even more. Eventually, the width of the chasm had grown so great that the compressed rock under the subterranean chambers sprung upward, giving birth or causing what we call now the mid-oceanic ridge. It wraps around the entire Earth like the seam of a baseball. It does the exact thing, the path that we see from the flood. There's your path of least resistance. Do I have another one after that? Same thing. Walt Brown book. Boom. So, continental plates, hydroplates, still had some water beneath them, slid downhill racing away from the Atlantic Ridge. They reached speeds, they believe, about 45 miles an hour. And then they run into resistance. What happens when they run into resistance? They compress, fold like an accordion. So that means portions of the hydroplate buckled down, formed ocean trenches. Portions that buckled up, mountains. That's why every mountain, every major mountain chain in the world is parallel to an oceanic ridge. As it's folding like an accordion, folding up, folding down, folding up, folding down. So if you pay attention to major mountain chains in the world, they will be parallel to an oceanic ridge or trench. All right, fountains. This fountain busting forth, this is super hot stuff coming up. This is superheated water hitting the stratosphere. If there was this vapor canopy that they talk about, it would have melted that canopy, superheated water hitting the stratosphere, caverns that were created in the earth, because volcanoes would have spewed out everything they had at this time too. The caverns would have spewed out billions of tons of magma along with all this mud hitting the air. It talks about how the waters, where the waters went, all these caverns that were created after everything burst forth would have collapsed. The water would have receded in a runoff effect like the world has never seen, killing anything else. It's a guy, Kurt Landers, head of geology, Michigan University, says, this is his quote, "Can we as seekers of the truth shut our eyes any longer to the obvious fact that large areas of the seafloor have sunken vertically, distances measured in miles?" Large areas. That's exactly what the Bible describes happened in Genesis 8. So the flood waters gradually receded from the earth after 150 days. So the runoff effect from a global flood would have to be indescribable. Like these huge underground caverns are beginning to collapse and the water's running back into them, billions and billions of gallons per second. I don't even know how you figure that, acres of gallons, like a global toilet flush all at once. It explains why we have destruction of and the fossil layers that we have. It explains so many different things. The flood explains coal deposits, oil deposits, salt. You know salt has yet to be found anywhere else. We haven't found salt on the moon. We haven't found salt in outer space. We haven't found salt anywhere but Earth. Earth. You know, you're paid a salary, aren't you? You know what that word comes from? Salarium. Salarium. The Roman soldiers were paid a salt amount every pay period, the salarium, because it was worth that much money because it used to preserve things and everything. Rock salt's made from anywhere there was huge subterranean sea waters, right, that's then evaporated out of there or moved out of there. The salt that's left there creates rock salt. There's so many things that point to this. Next thing we want to talk about is vapor canopy. Yes, I told you in week 1, canopy theory. The Creation Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, the doctor that's over that, and many, many other guys have got together about this vapor canopy. Most planets have an ice crystal canopy that surrounds it. So prior to the flood, many people believe the world was surrounded by this vapor canopy. Tons of reputable scientists talk about this, described in Genesis 1, 6, and 7 as the firmament. But it explains, here's the thing about the vapor canopy, and the only reason I talk about it, it explains so many biblical pictures to us. Things that happened prior to the flood, scientific evidence. Genesis 1, 6, and 7, God said, "Let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters from the heavens and the waters from the earth." That's what happened. God made this space to separate the waters from the earth and the waters from the heaven. So it seems to describe water existing both above and below the expanse of sky, where birds fly, okay? Above the area where birds fly and below. Genesis 1:20, then God said, "Let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth to open in the open expanse of the heavens." So above this expanse of the heavens, in the atmosphere, the water would have existed in the form of ice crystals around our atmosphere in an orbital type pattern. When the caverns of the deep, as I already explained, would have begun to erupt, Genesis 7:11, Noah's 600 years old. The 17th day of the second month, all the underground waters erupted from the earth, and rain fell in mighty torrents from the sky. Not only that water falling down, but this would have been a seeding effect, spewing hot water. Volcanoes blew out lava, like I said. Hot ash would have gone into the atmosphere. Ice crystals would have melted. The canopy melted. It rained down mud and nastiness all over the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. No more vapor canopy. Here's the deal. If the vapor canopy theory is true, you would expect subtropical conditions to be seen all over the world before the flood. Okay? Because the canopy these ice crystals would create a greenhouse effect. And that's what the fossil record supports. Northern tip of Vancouver, the Vancouver Islands, they found fossilized palm trees. Spitsbergen, the Spitsbergen Islands, north of Russia, that's not in the right place, but okay. We'll get back to it. I don't know how that got out of place. They found palm tree leaves that are 10 to 12 foot in length. That's actually a cockroach. We'll get back to him in a minute, I think. There we go. Okay, so they found, that's not a legal picture, but we're using it tonight. Okay, palm tree leaves, 10 to 12 foot in length. In Siberia and Alaska, they have found camels, lions, horses, mammoth, tigers, bison, sheep, and rhinos. They don't live there today. It's too cold. Come on. But it must have been warm at one time. In the South Pole, they have found a fossilized remain of forest with tree trunks that are 3 foot in diameter. So the vapor canopy would also serve to reflect and disperse harmful radiation from coming into the atmosphere from the sun, which would help plants and animals live longer, less radiation, which would explain why the average age of man was 912 years before the flood. But after the flood, you watch the ages, they begin to grow shorter and shorter at a very rapid rate. Pre-diluvian, pre-deluge conditions, plants and animals would have been expected to live much longer, grow much larger. And the fossil record supports that. Moss-like plants, 3 feet tall. Now that's believe it or not, it's a moss-like plant. I have a picture of a lady standing beside it, but I didn't know the lady, and I didn't know if I could use the picture, so I didn't. But they have found fossilized asparagus stalks, 40 foot tall. I would feed my family, well, me and Lane, because they don't eat it, I don't think. Asparagus, does he eat it? No. It would feed us forever, but not Aiden. Aiden would starve to death. I had to cut your asparagus with a chainsaw. Horsetail reeds. The next one I have, these are horsetail reeds. They're over 50 foot tall. 50 foot tall. You know what I'm talking about, horsetail reeds? Little thing. Okay, there's a picture of a lady holding just the base of one of these is the next one. Just the base of a horsetail reed. So, now we get to cockroaches. That joker is 1 foot in diameter. If standing up, just hear me out, standing up, he comes above my knee. From his hind end of his wings to, you think it's bad for you? Yes, praise God for the flood, exactly. Where were they? I mean, before, where we weren't. What you want to bet? Noah said no. 2 by 2, but not you. Yes. Yes. You imagine? There's actually a really good fossilized, I didn't want to put it on here because it's so good, but it's crushed face down. So I don't know if you've ever seen the face, like a microscopic picture of the face of a cockroach, but it's wicked looking. It's weird, and it fossilized very well, but it's so well it looks fake, so I have to explain it to people. But how about dragonflies with a 3 foot wingspan? This dude's wingspan is 36 inches. A modern day hawk is 24 inches. That's a bad joker. That would take your dogs off with it. They would have to be smarter. They would. I almost, you know what's funny is I didn't put a picture of a pre-diluvian mosquito fossilized, but they're humongous. Like Louisiana mosquitoes got nothing on this guy. Like he had tattoos and was smoking a cigar. He was a huge mosquito. Fossilized clams that are over 2 feet diameter. Yes, sir. Had to be huge. Had to be humongous. I think Adam was a lot larger than we were. I do think he was larger than us. Um, the idea of Adam's hands, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen it, but I've heard about it. Think about this. We're replica of replica of replica, right? If he's the original, Adam was prime. Adam was creation number one as far as mankind. He was meant to be eternal. He was not meant to die. So one, there was nothing on earth for him to fear because there was no death anyway. But he still was given dominion, except for maybe 1 foot cockroaches. Yeah, he was given dominion over the earth. So there's nothing on this earth that could have dominated him. You know, in intelligence, I don't know if that's intelligence or strength both, but because T Rex is pretty big. But I think he was. I think we have throughout history. We just over time we've got less and less. Now I do believe that by the time we get to the biblical writers, Goliath's about 9 foot 10 inches tall. That was humongous. There was nothing around that size at that point. But if we talk about the sons of God procreating with the daughters of man and creating giants, then I would have to imagine God's first creation in Adam and Eve. They weren't tiny. They weren't. I think they were bigger than us. So absolutely, and they didn't have belly buttons. That's my favorite one. No umbilical cord. They don't need one. So fossilized clams they found over 2 feet in diameter. I got an oyster thing here, I think. Yeah, that's an oyster. A fossilized oyster is 11.5 feet wide. Now, I like oysters. I like raw oysters, but I couldn't handle that. Couldn't do it. Yes? He's laying on it. It's an 11.5 foot clam. It may as well be. I mean, he's been clamified. So, all right, I got another one. I think of these. This is like an area of these clams that have been found, these oysters and clams. See how big they are next to the two guys? Okay. Believe it or not, these pictures are so much harder to find, even with the internet. This stuff that has been reported on throughout years, they scrub this stuff as best they can, which is another thing that makes it just all sketchy to me. These guys here are 450 miles from the beach and 2.5 miles in the air on top of mountains. Just saying. Okay? So, give me the jellyfish slide. Jellyfish, these are jellyfish have been fossilized. Jellyfish should not be, they're not going to die. And church finger, okay. Jellyfish are not going to die without their body just being eaten up or eroding away. They would have to be covered quickly, very quickly, in sand, mud, tar, something. Talking about things getting bigger or living longer, we have hornless rhinos that have been 17 foot tall. Fossilized hornless rhinos. It's a rhino with no horn, apparently. Okay, 17 foot tall. Pigs the size of cattle. Fossilized pigs the size of cattle. Camels over 12 feet tall. Birds that were over 11, some 18 foot tall. There's the elephant bird was 20 foot tall. Beavers the size of pigs. This will tick any hunter off. This is actually a species of deer that's been fossilized, 12-foot antler spread. Ground sloths were 18 to 20 feet long. Okay, things were bigger. They lived longer too, less radiation. And by the way, reptiles, if you've ever owned a reptile, I don't know why you would. We had one for a short period of time. It's a bearded dragon, different. You can't tell if they're sick or need anything because they're reptiles. They're not cuddly. They don't like you. They don't pretend to like you. You're just the problem that feeds them. But reptiles never stop growing as long as they live. No matter what, even today, they will never stop growing. That joker, that dragon at the zoo here, he's not going to stop growing as long as he's alive. They never hit a mature stage where they just stop. So think about this. If they lived a very long time, protected from harmful effects of radiation, maybe dinosaurs are just really big lizards. They kind of are. Duck-billed dinosaur, we have found fossilized swimming in a position with his head up as if he were gasping for air. We found many of them. Seems like he died in a flood. My whole point in this stuff is to get you to search it yourself. I want you to seek it out yourself. I want you to learn yourself. I want you to argue with me and think I am so wrong that you will go find it yourself. There are mountains of evidence that support the biblical account of a universal flood. I don't care what you think about starlight. But when it comes to the flood, it's in the Bible. It's something we need to take as fact. And we need to seek out the fact in it. And if you take the Bible's account of a flood, a literal flood, it explains a whole lot of things that are otherwise unexplainable phenomenon that we observe on this earth, from salt to coal beds, oil reserves, all of that stuff. It just makes a lot of sense. And it puts things into perspective, puts things together for us. So seek out the answers for yourself. If it's in the Bible account, let's take it as fact. Let's not try to run away with it. Let's not try to run away from it. Let's not try to marry it with something else to make it fit the modern narrative, as in like a regional flood or something like that. Let's take it as biblical fact. Because if there's one aspect of this that is wrong or false, then the rest of it is too. Y'all might as well find something else to do on Wednesdays and Sundays. I got to find something else to do Wednesday, or just become a charlatan. If there's one aspect that's false, then the rest of it is. So you need to have a respect for your faith. And I get it. None of this is a salvation issue, which is why we don't do it very often, because it's really not. It's just fun to do sometimes. But not a salvation issue. Have enough respect for your faith that you'll stand for it and defend it if have to, and have the knowledge to defend it if you need to, instead of backing away from it. At this point, there are too many atheists that know what they believe and know their arguments better than Christians know their arguments and their beliefs. So we need to study, we need to know, we need to be apologetics. We're ambassadors. One of the things we're going to talk about Sunday, I'm going to talk about, like I said, your position. But we'll talk about your purpose in the kingdom. But there's 3 parts to your purpose. We're going to talk about your place in the kingdom, your part in the kingdom, and your power in the kingdom. And it's amazing how many people try to operate in the power that they have no right to operate in. So we're going to talk about that kind of stuff. But as we discuss it, understand, it goes back to having a respect for your faith. You need to know how to operate in the kingdom. You need to know what you believe. You need to know what you can stand on. You need to know the truth you stand on. You need to know that you are solid in where you stand. If you're on a course correction, don't let it be a 1-week thing. Please, beyond the devolution, beyond the other stuff, if God got your attention Sunday, I am begging you, keep up with it. Not about what you do for God. Your place, your citizenship is secure because of your faith in Christ. But there's so much more that goes with that. It's the knowing who you are is one thing, but then realizing that there's responsibility that comes with that knowledge. Who you are in the kingdom, you have a responsibility to do what you're called to do with that too. So whatever your correction was, move on it. Have respect for your faith. Don't go beat up an atheist, okay, or a creationist, but study it for yourself. Find it out. I don't know. I have a couple more of these. Always had a lot of fun with them. I've got new information I've thrown into them. Not had as much fun this time just because I'm really wanting to get back to something else we were doing. So I'm trying to stick it through because we do need to talk about dinosaurs and stuff like that. But we're going to see where we're going. I want to know if anyone has any questions, concerns, theories. Like I've got to look up the Africa thing about it separating. Did you? I just want to know. So it talks about it separating. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yes. Yep. No, it's just quickly. Did I ask you this last week or a couple weeks ago about the coal? The was it me and you talking about the piece of wood that fell into the well here in Texas? They come. Okay, did you? It was here. They dug a well. 2x4 fell into the well. Years later, they're changing out the pump, and it comes back up, right? And it comes out solidified, just calcified all the way. In what, 50 years, 20 years, something like that. Water changes things. Bless you. You can throw acorns, depending on your water source, what the rain's like in Lufkin water especially. You can throw acorns out in a bucket in your backyard, come back in a number of months, they'll be petrified. Water changes a lot of things. Water has a lot of, it can cause destruction. It can cause things to age rapidly. So a flood describes many, many things. There's other stuff you and I have talked about. I can't remember it all right now, but like the oil deposits, they make tons of sense with a global flood. These caverns, these bodies being swept in, and we're not on the fossil fuel thing. It's a false name, but anyway, we're not going to be political tonight. But listen, we have or we can go ahead and shut off. Do me a favor, go ahead and get me off YouTube so I can close this out. All right. Yes.